Welcome to the Market Genius AI podcast. This is our leaders edition of the show, where we hear from go-to-market leaders on navigating careers and trends, what makes leaders great, and how to win in go-to-market.
In this leadership episode of Market Genius AI, our guest is Anne Prins, the VP of Global Product Partnerships at Klaviyo. It's great to have you on.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to dig into your vast experience and how you're thinking about things. You actually started your career in architecture and then moved over to technology, which is the world I know you in. I want to learn a little bit more about what that journey looked like and why the switch.
Yeah, people often say like, oh, you work in tech. Like, did you go to school for CS or do you have a business degree? And I'm like, no, I have a degree. I have a master's in architecture, like building architecture. And I think, Lizzie, you were quite surprised. You're like, what? Like, it's not what I would have expected. But there is some method to the madness. So I worked in real estate development after undergrad, and I thought I was going to be a real estate developer. So I went to architecture school and I got my master's degree. But when I graduated, it was the 2008, 2010 housing crisis, and there were no jobs. And, real estate it was not a place where people were hiring. No one was building. In hindsight, it would have been a great time to buy real estate.
Yep.
I sadly had no money, so that was not an option for me. I should have, I could have become a developer if I did at the time. But I started working in an architecture firm. And while that job was really great learning, I also discovered that I was way more passionate about the kind of operational side of professional services. So, how work actually gets delivered. I also had a pretty serious boyfriend at the time who is now my husband. And he is an architect. So, that experience in the recession really reinforced it doesn't make sense to have two people in the same industry in the same household.
You got to diversify.
So in 2012, I met two ex-Microsoft product guys who had this idea for a software company to help professional services companies like my architecture firm, or like the architecture firm I worked at, staff and manage work. And this was the start of our startup 10,000 Feet, which was a resource management and project management software company. And it was also the start of my pivot into tech. So I've been entrepreneurial my whole life. And I think, the pivot was less about a specific industry, but more about seeing an opportunity and then pursuing that opportunity.
Yeah, and solving a problem you were having, which is how many startups start, is okay, I wish I had a tool that could do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Fun fact, I applied to college as an architecture major, and I looked at the workload and the things you have to do, the day long or 4 hour, and I was like, I can't do this. And I went and did communications, which led me to business. So I came close to a similar path, and I graduated in 2010. So I would have probably had a similar path there.
Dodged the bullet with the 2010. Yeah,
exactly. Yes, absolutely. So you got into tech. Throughout tech, you've had many different roles and things that you've overseen: sales, biz ops, sales engineering, platform expansion, partnerships. Of course, these roles have similarities, but it's not the traditional growth path. Often you kind of partnerships has a bunch of entry points, but you're a salesperson and you're a sales manager, then you're VP of sales or director of sales, VP, so forth. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, why all these roles and what kind of drew you to them and what that journey has looked like.
The career path I've had has really been it's all connected. So to me, it makes sense. It's like I'm building this library of information that really informs my own perspective and how I approach problems. So it does make sense, but it also doesn't look like the traditional resume that you would see on LinkedIn for most people. It's also a blessing and a curse. So I can sell with kind of that product hat on, personally answered thousands of support tickets. So I understand the implications of poorly implementing a solution. I can kind of easily put myself in another person's shoes. But it's, when I was at 10,000 feet for 7 years, and I did all the customer facing work. We rotated support tickets, and, we had QA, did QA. I had pager duty where I had to like wake up in the middle of the night if we had an outage. I ran sales and customer success and support and operations. When we got acquired by Smartsheet, I managed the operational aspects of integrating our two companies. So, what does it mean to change pricing, and how should we move all of our customers over to their CRM, and what new ROEs should we have? And then I went on to lead sales engineering for North America. And now my job at Klaviyo, and I could kind of go into more detail, but these are all really micro pivots, and they've been incredibly rewarding. They've also been very challenging. And it's really about how am I constantly learning and being pushed, outside of my comfort zone into a space that I can be creative and learn. I will caveat this story with like my career path is not the easiest way to go. So every interview is a challenge because I have to basically convince someone that, I can do a job that I've never actually done before. It's far easier to just build deep expertise and then keep climbing that career ladder.
I have a question about that. I'm curious how that makes you as a hiring manager. Like, does that change your perspective on what people's experience is?
Definitely, and it also changes the experience that I think someone's college degree or lack of college degree has in their ability to do a job. I often look for like soft skills. I often look for like high slope qualities, or, I think someone's ability to communicate really clearly.
Yeah, I think college degrees should be a thing of the past. I'm like hoping, well, it depends. Obviously, there's certain careers that like you need to know the basics, and college really helps with that. But yeah, I could care less if you went to college or not, or if you have a certain degree or not. And I feel like that's been a little bit of a wave, but not quite enough of a wave. But yeah, I think it makes you a really good hiring manager to give someone a chance to do something new and to do pivots similar to you.
We actually on our team have, I think, so I have a team of 15 people today at Klaviyo, and I pride myself in it's a team that a lot of people transfer to. So they come from another team at Klaviyo onto my team. And we've had a few folks come from sales and like customer ed, like technical writing, sales engineering, or solution architecture come to my team. It's really cool to be a place where you might want to try something new, and it's a safe space to do that.
I come from like a BD background, but not in MarTech partnerships, so I had to learn that. But people on my team that came from marketing, people on my team from PMM, from product. And what's so great about that is like if you have a diverse set of people, they can all lean in on those things really well.
Yeah.
Partnerships is fun to be able to bring in people that have different skill sets. Klaviyo is a big name and a great company. I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey there and what you initially were doing, how you ended up in the role you're in today.
So I was introduced to Klaviyo actually through a VC. My first job at Klaviyo was working as a GM. Really, it wasn't officially GM position, but it was essentially a GM role where I had a cross-functional or matrixed team supporting a strategy that I led. So I led the strategy for our diversification, essentially like outside of our core market, like SMB kind of Shopify businesses. And that role has since evolved into my current position, which is leading global product partnerships. And my team's job is to manage integrations, technology partners, and ensure that we're providing value to customers through, the use cases that our partners can extend.
Just to double click into that a little bit and share what you can, obviously. I think many companies start by building in the Shopify marketplace, and then they're like, oh, we have to do more than this. I mean, there's a huge TAM, but they have to expand it beyond it. What do you think was like the most important part of that strategy, or what were some of the challenges that you faced in that process?
I think it's really thinking about like where are the customers? So, like, who are the customers? Almost thinking about it from an ICP perspective and not just like who are the players in that ecosystem, but like who are the ICPs? So, are we talking about a brand that has like a ton of complexity to their business and is better suited by something that's more custom or composable? Are we talking about a brand that has a multinational footprint and might need different localization? Are we talking about a brand that really started as a content company and has evolved into e-commerce? So I think like my advice and what I learned is like focus less on the platforms but more about, do you have the right product and the right ecosystem to support every ICP in the market you want to go into?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
And
sense.
don't think as much. I mean, that, and then there's a partner strategy with there, which is like, who are the partners you might need to work with to get to reach that audience
Yeah.
together?
Don't start with the integration. I think that's a common mistake of like, we'll just do a Shopify integration and then it will all, I'm not
Yeah.
speaking from experience or anything. We'll just do a Shopify integration that will solve all our problems. I'm like,
Yes.
but does it
That's
solve
all you need.
the Shopify customers' problems? Because that's ultimately who you need to be thinking about. Yeah. That seems like a really interesting role to take on, and I know it's evolved, but I understand why that would be appealing to someone that likes to solve problems and challenges and build strategy. What beyond that kind of attracts you to roles and or companies? What do you look for when you're looking for a new opportunity?
So when I started at Klaviyo, the thing I was looking for was I really wanted to be at a place where I could be a builder. So my first kind of criteria when I'm looking at a new company is I need to be able to build something and have things that aren't already figured out. And high growth companies tend to require a lot of frequent iterations and therefore like generally have more room for building and creativity or innovation. Maintenance is not my jam. So as soon as something is kind of like figured out maintenance mode, then I'm like looking for the next thing. I also really want to be at a place where I can help or the tech is helping people run their business. At 10,000 feet, we built software to give you the big picture of your business. That's why it was called 10,000 feet. At Smartsheet, like we built project management. We had this toolkit where you could essentially like assemble any process or project. You could scaffold your project with the toolkit. At Klaviyo, we help business owners more efficiently connect with their customers in a really highly personalized way. So again, I don't like, sometimes I'm like, am I working out? Am I doing meaningful enough work? And does it matter? And I think, I don't need to be in a role where I'm like curing cancer, but I do want to feel like my work is having a positive impact on people. And like the tech is helping them really spend more time focusing on what matters.
Yeah.
And that could be like, a business owner who used to have to like work on Saturday mornings and like now they can go to their kids' sports game.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what is the value of that time that you save by using Klaviyo or using,
Any other tool
yeah.
that you're working on? Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. You've stepped into obviously different companies, but other divisions and types of leadership roles quite a bit. That means that you're not necessarily an expert in each of those. And so I want to understand what your approach is to learning the ins and outs of a new function and how you work through that.
I think really like this is where it's all connected. Fundamentally, like architecture school and that design background really gave me the foundation of being a really good problem solver. And that could be figuring out if you're doing architecture, like how are you going to fit 10 units in this apartment building on this lot? Or if you are breaking into a new market, what are the components? How do you understand that market so you can put together a proposal? Or, how do you get kids to eat more vegetables? Or like whatever the problem is, it's really like foundational problem solving skills that I think I learned. So I think a couple things with like how I would approach starting in a new role or learning a new first is like be so curious. Discovery is 100% the most important part of the sales process because it's where you build trust. It is where you're asking questions, the person's telling you the problem that they have. You're really like sharing that you care and that you are curious and want to understand how to help. And learning a new function is the same. It's like asking questions and understanding what are the challenges. I think being empathetic to where people are coming from, but also like no bullshit. It's not that everyone gets a medal and that it's not a pity party when you're being empathetic and you're doing this kind of like learning about people's roles. But making sure people feel like all of those voices and ideas are really like welcomed. And then I think regardless of what you're doing, any role on any team, like your job as a leader is to come in and say like, I want to understand how to help you and like unblock friction or create a path for you to be able to achieve this outcome. But like, I'm also there to elevate your work. So I'm going to take what you're doing and I'm going to show what that means to other leaders across the business, or basically like level up the cool things that the team is doing so that people around the business or outside of the company can see the impact of that work.
Yeah.
And that applies anywhere. Curiosity, empathy, and like elevation of work. Like just take that into any new position. And it's a pretty like foundational way to have success with leadership.
Yeah, even if you're an expert in something, if you're entering a new company, you have to do all those things. You don't understand like the internal politics or what the team's facing. You don't know everything about what they're doing, which I think is great. And then I
Yeah.
think you also like clearly in a very positive way, like believe in yourself. And that's something you can give to your team members too, through elevating their work, through them stepping into new things, which is really empowering. So I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, speaking about actually this protocol, right? Like we're talking about in any role, you have to bring certain qualities as
Hmm.
onboarding as a leader, right? But one of the things during that onboarding process is to build the trust, and that is extremely important when you enter the new function.
Hmm.
Right? So you mentioned about I was shifting, I was doing something else. Now I'm just in a different function, and I have to be that
Yeah.
person that is suddenly overseeing something that maybe I was not dealing with before.
So when I started running sales engineering at Smartsheet, my company was acquired. And so I came in as a leader of this other company. And then the business was like looking for a job for me, right? Like, where are you going to go ultimately at this company? And so when I got the opportunity to run sales engineering, I came in and I took a job that another leader on the team really wanted and like had been working toward, like growing his career into this position that I just like got acquired and came in and took with not a lot of experience in that area. And I had to prove through that process that like I was not there to minimize his good work. I really was there to help advocate for the team, and my success didn't require him to not be successful. Like, we're not competing with each other. And I think, I think once he understood that, we really clicked. And even though we're not working together now, like we still have a really great working relation. Like he calls, or we'll talk about things or call with challenges. So I think like coming in and helping the team see like what is your role and how are you there to really again like understand and elevate. I think a listening tour, like, everybody will be like, yeah, you did a listening tour. So like it's not something I made up. But I think how you do the tour, it's not asking about what people do, but I think asking like what kind of work do you enjoy most? And what do you dread? So my favorite question to ask, even on a discovery call, I love this as a discovery call question, is like, if you had a magic wand to solve one thing in your job, what would it be? It's really open ended. And I think a lot of times ICs are really bogged down by operational or interpersonal challenges that really get in the way of doing their actual job. So, as a new leader, if you can come in and ask some questions that help you see where you can have some quick wins, can you help someone unblock something quickly or solve a really like complex interpersonal challenge that they have with another teammate? Like that can help you develop trust and help the team be productive much more quickly.
Whenever like a team member is out, especially on like extended parental leave or something, and
Mhm.
I like have to sub in and do stuff, and I'm like, this is what you deal with. You need to be telling me about this because we need to like work through these. So yeah, creating a communication and trust that they can just come and be like, and you give them the opportunity to say that is awesome, so that you can actually help fix some of those operational inefficiencies.
Yeah, and it's not like the listening tour shouldn't end when you once you're, like, in the role, like, you should continue to do this as a leader, so you're continuing to understand, like, what are those things that you can help reduce friction on.
You mentioned a lot about the versatility of skills that you acquired through your career building that, I'll call it Swiss Army knife skill set, right? So the question I have for you is like, is there anything that happened maybe early in your life, or it was a part of the opportunities that were just coming your way, and you just said, "Hey, I want to try." I was just like you said, it was a curiosity around that. And my second question on this one is like, is this really impacting how you manage the team? How are we leading the team towards solution or best option to choose from?
Yeah, I think when I was talking to Lizzie early on, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm kind of like a Swiss Army knife," and it like sounds cool because you're bringing it like on a trip, and you need to like open, a bottle of wine like on in the
Yeah.
forest or something. Like, yeah, it's totally like what you need. So, yes, I think it's a good analogy for my skill set, but I sometimes wonder, would I rather be like a beautiful Japanese chef's knife or something that's like really highly suited to the task? But essentially, I think it's true. Like, I have a lot of skills that are like I can come in and like kind of understand how to solve something and use the tools that I have to work through the problem. I do think I've always kind of been this way. Like, I have a new hobby. I just got into the sport of orienteering and adventure racing or navigation racing, and it's basically running, like, between locations with a compass and a map.
Where do you do this?
So there are events that are happening all over, and I go my son is 9, and so he's on my team, and we go and, do
Oh,
it
that's awesome.
together. My husband does it as well. I think that kind of, like, just trying something and, like, learning a new skill set is really, like, it's more than just my work is what I'm saying. There's a lot of new things that we're trying that are it's kind of a part of who I am.
Yeah.
And then I think the question about leading a team, the way that I would say it shows up in how I lead the team and think about how we work together as a team is first the thing you already said. Like, I tend to hire like a pretty diverse set of people and a diverse set of perspectives. Like, I really welcome that. Like, you come, oh, you don't have that in your background, or you bring this thing and you bring this thing. I also think that it's about pushing people not to make assumptions with how we should solve problems. So a lot of times people tend to kind of think like, "Oh, you just like start with the solution or you just assume we're going to do it a certain way." Instead of saying like, "Well, what are you trying to do? What's the why? And then how might you solve it a different way? And what tools would you need to solve it a different way based on whatever constraints there might be."
It sounds like you kind of build a team that's also a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
So it
have
is impacting. It is impacting how the team is
yeah,
behaving,
yeah.
right? It's coming from the top. I think we can't forget about this. This is part of the leadership skills, right? Like you demonstrating this by example, and then people say, "Oh, actually, this works," right? So why should I just do this, other way? It works. Well, I'm gonna try it the same way or similar way, right? I'm gonna try to use the similar skills. So it's not about mimicking someone, but I think it's having that approach, right? So speaking about approach, and I know that when you joined the Klaviyo, you were brought in and say, hey, we probably need someone with a fresh perspective on things, right? And instead of promoting someone within, and I'm not saying that the company didn't have a right candidates. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that there are different approaches, right? When you hire someone externally and then you're promoting somebody within. How does actually change things at Klaviyo, like in your opinion?
There's always a balance of bringing someone in who has, like, deep knowledge in an area, and hopefully there's a mix. Every team has a mix of people who have, like, the traditional career path and have always worked in an area, and I'm working with folks who are, deep experts in a specific part of the business that I'm maybe not, and even people on my team have sometimes way more experience in a specific area. I guess it's like it's a balance of having the right mix of folks on the team in order to help support one another. I think I have come into partnerships itself and looked for what are the things I can do to improve how we do partnerships at Klaviyo. So my team manages integrations and relationships with our ISV and technology partners. We basically fill the app marketplace with kind of out of the box integration opportunities for customers. So we work with hundreds of technology partners who extend the use cases that you can do with Klaviyo, either by pushing data in or pulling data out. Partnerships has always been really, really relationship based, but people and relationships are expensive. And not every partner can have a partner manager or this kind of like bespoke go to market program. Like we can only really do that for a few partners who are the most strategically aligned with what Klaviyo wants to do. When I think about like I came in and you could have someone who has been doing partnerships who kind of came to the same conclusion, but I came in and my first realization or the realization that I have been having and am continuing to have is we need to do everything we can to build more productized experiences to solve partner challenges. Most partners want to, understand how you're going to help them grow their business and how we can help mutual customers have more success. Like that is like what you do. Like two companies are like, how do we do this better together? And there are lots of ways to solve that problem without solely relying on a person and a relationship. It also just makes it easier to do business with Klaviyo. Like we want to do a lot in making like really push the productization of the tech partner experience and make that experience something that like partners are ultimately winning from.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something important about the you can arrive with the similar conclusions whether you are someone who's coming with external perspective or internal. What I think it's harder for a person that is promoted internally is to have external perspective,
Mhm.
especially for individuals that are spending a lot of time, being in that space, right? The same company. I've been with the company like HP for 13 years, right? But I was taking a lot of ugly jobs, multiple different roles.
Yeah.
Still, it wasn't enough to have that external perspective,
Yeah.
and I've learned this in a hard way. So, speaking about learnings, what are the key learnings that you have with Klaviyo since you joined the company? Like, what would you call out as the biggest
Well,
learnings at the
I
company?
Yeah, I chuckled when I got like I got some of these questions in advance, and so I could look at them and, think about my answers, and it was actually kind of fun to, like, think about, like, what is the answer to this question? But this one I knew right away, and it was, like, saying yes to too much. I love to say yes, like, more, 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 yes, like, "Oh, yeah, can you do that?" "Damn straight, we can do that." But, like, there is a limit. And the limit is what you sacrifice in saying yes is the success of everything else that you're also trying to work on. And this is completely obvious, but I think how you address saying yes is not necessarily saying no, but saying not yet and being really comfortable with saying not yet and really comfortable with prioritization and sequencing of work. So we're really working toward the bigger thing. Like, what are we saying yes to that's a much bigger thing that we can achieve together?
Yeah, I think especially in partnerships, like I get asked all the time, "Hey, can
Oh,
we
no.
go partner with so
Yeah.
and so?" And I'm like, "We absolutely could do that
Yes.
at the expense of all these other partnerships we're working on right now to some degree." And it's a bright, like shiny thing to go and partner with certain people or certain companies. It's important in every role, but I find it very hard in partnerships
It's like
sometimes.
every single day. There's something that's cool that we should do. Yeah. And it's hard.
And my favorite is like, "We should go partner with Amazon." And I'm like, You know how hard that like, I mean, yes, we can go about doing that. It's gonna have to be like a big process that we go through and that we could decide to do
Yeah.
that. So, yeah.
Well, the best answer to that question is, or that statement is, yeah, sure, and you move on. I mean, this is this is probably
I
what you
also
can
do
do.
that.
I mean, how is this really helping me? Telling me that I should partner with Amazon. I
Uh,
mean, by the way, when you were describing this, it sounds like operations. There's a lot of similarities, and I never worked in operations at any company that you were not in a position to be overwhelmed with the volume of requests. I mean, although I have a different reaction to this, my answer is maybe.
Mhm.
Depends on the list of
Yeah.
priorities. So give me all the things that you have, and I can tell you what a priority is. And that's when the conversation stops. What I also learned is when you guiding people how to make these suggestions. Because people have a tendency to be very creative on the spot, but they
Mhm.
never really think through how to operationalize tasks. And when
Mhm.
you are in operations, so in any actually function that has to operationalize any strategy, you start realizing how many levels of things you need to put in place in order to make that happen.
Totally.
So that's one method. But
Yeah.
speaking about methods, leading the team, are you using any specific methods with your team?
Yeah, I think to piggyback on your question about, like, all the operational stuff that has to happen, I think that is very tied to it's not really a methodology, but it's more of a, like, refrain, and it's something I say a lot with the team, which is, like, "up and to the right." And I think many times teams are just like thinking too small and not far enough in the future. So like the scope is like this quarter or like what are we doing like next week? And then you never actually get to like the big thing you're trying to do as opposed to like starting big and working backwards. I think there's a lot of navel gazing and a lot of like, everyone's really busy, but there's not as much transformational work that actually happens. So, really like getting the team to think bigger. But then you can't think so big that the projects or the initiatives become unattainable or like, well, we're going to get this in 2 years. So, let's just wait for then. So, I think understanding that there are thousands of steps sometimes to operationalize these big kind of multi-year, multi-phase projects, and that's okay, especially if you are celebrating every step as like what's up and to the right. We made progress with this. My team is working on this kind of overhaul of our ISV program, our tech partner program, and our app marketplace experience. And 18 months ago, we started building the infrastructure to support OAuth so we could actually track adoption and usage of the partners. So it started like 18 months ago. And then it was like, and then we have OAuth. And now we have tracking. And now we have the Tableau reporting we need. And now we can push that into Salesforce. And now we could do, but it's like 18 months of operational things
Yes.
that are stitched together so that we can end up with this thing that is, way bigger and can be more transformational for the business. I don't know if it's a framework, but it's really this like think big and then celebrate the micro steps to get there.
Yeah, think big and then break it up into like bite-sized pieces that we
Yeah.
can actually accomplish, and then let's celebrate those milestones. I like that approach. I think people tend to be in the day-to-day or they're, to your point, so big, and you're like, "How are we ever gonna get there?" And so, like, breaking into the chunks is obviously very helpful.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is just the company is growing, right? It's not only an obligation to its size and other people that are participating doing day-to-day tasks, but it's also to investors, right? And that
Mhm.
there's this element of reporting that the company needs to embrace and has to do this according to the SEC rules and ensure that it's reporting the good results, right? So that prioritization that we discussed earlier is critical.
Mhm.
How are you going to engage your resources? They're not infinite.
Right.
You have to think about which teams will be occupied with that task for this
Mhm.
quarter, next quarter, and how this going to impact these results, right? Plus, so you have all these corporate dev type of initiatives that the company needs to implement as well. This is across the board, right? It's a product, it can be partnership, it can be sales, marketing, and so on, so on. But all of that is leading us to financial results. And we know that right now the market is promoting the companies that can generate profitability, can demonstrate profitability, and generate cash. So, is this impacting some way your team, or the way you leading the team at the moment?
I think less so at first I, like, won't say anything about Klaviyo's. But
Oh, no, no.
no, 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 I mean, I'm teasing a little bit, but I joked that I was like, "I'm not gonna say anything about Klaviyo as a company being, what where Klaviyo is going." But I think I've always led, like, leaner teams. So even in 2014 or 2015 when, like, VC money was really easy, we decided to bootstrap our startup 10,000 feet and really focus on sustainable growth. So I don't think it's really changed, like, my own approach, because when you have that freedom, or if you sort of are like the working within, you only have this many resources, or you only have this many people to help with a project, like, those are constraints, and creativity is 100% like born out of constraints. Like, there are thousands of ways to solve a problem,
Mhm.
given the constraints, what are the options that could be deployed to solve it. The second thing is, like, really, like, work on what matters. So this is getting back to, like, understanding the why and the big projects. Be, like, ruthless about doing the stuff that actually has the impact. So if you don't have as many people, you don't have as much money, you don't have the dollars for that event or that MDF campaign, or, the thing that you really wanna do, what could you do, and what are the things that are the biggest, like, impactful events or the biggest impactful activities, and make sure the team is, like, really focused on those levers. I also think, like, this is really good for the ICs. Like, if you can do more with fewer people and people are working on stuff that's creative and work that matters, I think you're not only, like, setting the company up for better profitability, like more success, like more sustainable success, I should say. People also like that. Like, people wanna be like, "I'm working on cool things and I get to be creative." So it kind of does 2 things.
Yeah, that dovetails nicely into our next topic, which I feel like sometimes ICs are not as excited about AI. So we've talked a lot about, more efficient operations, removing blockers. We think AI is setting us up well to do that. And then, of course, we've talked a lot about relationships and the people on your teams. I'm curious to kind of hear how you're thinking about the intersection of humans and AI and technology and where things are heading.
Well, we're certainly, like, all watching, and I'm by no means an expert. I'm also, like, not an early adopter. Like, my personality type isn't an early adopter, so, like, I have an old iPhone that's, like, a hand-me-down. I've, like, never bought crypto or considered investing in crypto, and I like to read, like, paper books. So, I think take all those things and consider my perspective. But I also think, like, my job at Klaviyo is to think about the what if. I've been in productivity technology for more than 10 years, and I'm very intrigued by how AI will really improve, like, how people work and how they deliver their work. At Klaviyo, we're thinking about this a lot. What can we do to really, like, shape the future of where the industry is going in relation to AI? Of course, like, it can be, like, a vehicle for misinformation and bias, so I'm also, like, relatively guarded in thinking about the impact that it will have on humanity and on people. I have a son who's in high school, and he's just starting to think about, like, his own career path and what kinda job he wants to go into, and having watched, his parents, like, figure out what they're doing in their careers. So discussing a lot of, like, what doors are likely opening with AI or will be open and what may not, and how to think about that when you're making decisions about, your future.
I think about it a little bit of like, oh, I'm so glad I got the career and I did before AI became such a big thing. But also, there's going to be so much more that opens up
Yeah.
too. That's like with any technology, it evolves and new doors open as well. Just to double click a little bit and with what you're overseeing now in terms of, product partnerships, do you see any opportunities for AI or new technology to help accelerate partner-led growth and help partner managers and partnerships overall?
Like absolutely. I mean, I think there are lots of opportunities, but one specific example is, anyone who's worked in product partnerships, specifically integrations, knows the constant struggle with R&D to get resources for integrations. Like it's really hard. You're constantly kind of like, what do we do? Who's going to build it? How are we going to make it happen? And I think integrations are very unsexy. It's like the worst, most unsexy engineering task. Like no one wants to work on them. They're simultaneously like somehow like kind of easy and complex. So it's like it's also working with another company's documentation, which could be a little bit, hard to understand. It's not the most fun. It's also the perfect job for AI. I think if you look at emergent middleware solutions like Zapier or MuleSoft, like those are kind of starting to be in that space. But I think we will see a lot of AI based, like emergent AI based engineering really focused on solving the connectivity between products, like leveraging public documentation. So it's already there, it's already published. And how do we then, lean on that? I think the challenge in this, again, once we don't wanna just set AI free to go, is how do we ensure that the outcomes of that work, that the integrations are actually solving meaningful use cases? And I think that's where, like, the intersection of the humans, creativity, using the tooling that can be, served up or provided through AI is really, really interesting.
Couldn't agree more with that. And I think about this is like I keep pitching Demetrius. I'm like, this is what we should go build a tool that does integrations. This is where I get excited because I'm in it every day. Like I think about it with healthcare insurance. Like it can read all that documentation and spit
Yeah,
out what the answers are. And this is like the part of it that's exciting to like going back to your earlier point of like solving people's everyday needs, whether
yeah.
that is getting an integration done or reading through long documentation that you're not familiar with to solve a daily need. So that's the exciting part.
I know people joke a lot about like, oh, people use AI for therapy, but like that's a real use case. Like therapists are incredibly hard to find. They're intimidating, especially for like, yeah, I'll just say like young men, like
Yep.
the ones in my family who, I think it can be a really, really positive thing to start to think about how are we helping humanity with this tool set.
Yeah, and on that, like, it's the bias of information or misinformation, of course, but then there's all these upsides as well. And therapy's expensive, like
Yeah.
there's so many factors that come into that. So it's a good like stepping stone. We've talked a lot about finding the balance between tech automation and human touch. I think therapy's a great, great use case for us. Probably need to find that balance. But I'm curious to hear if there's any tools that you and or your team's been using that you've found to be really powerful in having this balance.
I don't think that I really have like the special tools. Like I personally use Claude, I use ChatGPT for my own kind of day to day. I think it's more about like how do I use them, and I think there are a few areas. And again, these are like any an AI expert might be like, ah, that's child's play, but that's fine. It's fine. The first one is just like skill gaps. So like what formula do you use for, XYZ, Excel formula, or I work a lot on modeling with BI and FP&A. And I like to give them an idea of what I'm thinking, but I'm not an expert in financial models. And so like how can AI extend my knowledge? So I go to them with a real like something that explains what I'm looking for. Or, deep research, like give me the pricing information for 10 companies. And like, is it always correct? Maybe not, but is it like directionally correct? And I can use that to then build on I'm getting this general sense for like where we're playing. It's incredibly helpful. I mean, it would take weeks to do the research you can do in just a matter of minutes with like a chat GPT. And then the last thing is like polish and packaging. So like if you're working on an idea, how can you polish that idea or like package it up for an email that I'm going to send to executives? So it might be that it's saving me time by thinking about what are the key points I want to pull out of this and then share that with, an audience that could be my team or could be a leadership team or something. I do wonder if ChatGPT though and other AI tools are just going to make like corporate writing like more bullshitty. Like it already is kind of bullshitty, but it feels like I wonder, I'm like, is there authenticity in this? How do we improve? But
Yeah. The internal stuff, it's like, I mean, you can either spend time working on strategic things or solving your team's problems or picking through a document to make it so people actually understand it. So like that use case is good. I love it for research. Like Perplexity is my best friend just to like
yeah.
what tools compete in the ad measurement space so I can
Yeah.
give this example and a product pitch. Like I don't want to have to Google it. Just give me the names. It's good for idea generation.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to use AI to write a whole playbook on a partnership, but if I'm struggling to come up with the title for it, well, that's wonderful. Or coming up with the outline. And then I think a human has to fill
Yeah.
in the meat of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing I want to chat about, I think obviously there's a lot of change constantly happening with technology and regulations and AI, but something that doesn't change is brands want to personalize experiences for customers and prospective customers, and Klaviyo is quite good at this. I want to hear your thoughts on how you're seeing personalization evolving and where you think it's heading.
It's such an interesting space right now with commerce and shopping experiences and personalized experiences, whether those are in a retail setting or in any sort of setting where you want to connect with your audience or your customer base in a more personalized way. Like it's there's a lot going on. If you aren't familiar with Klaviyo, so Klaviyo is a CRM and it's built specifically for B2C businesses. So B2C brands are selling directly to consumers, and they often need a more scalable way to understand their buyer, personalize those connections, and then ultimately like build relationships. So we think a lot about using data, the data layer in Klaviyo, to understand like what can brands do to connect with their consumers in a way that matters to that consumer. And Klaviyo supports a ton of retail merchants who typically are selling products via the e-commerce site. You know, we talked about Shopify, but maybe it's built on Shopify or WooCommerce, or it's a custom site, or it's BigCommerce. When we think about this space, I think where the shift is starting to happen is thinking about how people buy, or where AI is coming into this world that is very familiar to all of us, is how do people discover and buy stuff? So the primary channels for a long time now have always been like in a store or in a marketplace or in a D2C e-commerce site, right? Like those are kind of the three. You could say catalogs, but like that's kind of like a marketplace-ish kind of thing, maybe. And I think AI and social shopping with platforms like TikTok or Insta, they're starting to introduce this interstitial shopping opportunities really in between those channels. So no longer are we really talking about just like going to a store, discovering a product and buying it. We're talking about all of these like moments that happen in between those three primary channels for buying. I think product reviews is a huge space and huge opportunity for AI. Actually, before this podcast, I was like, oh, let's see what happens. So I searched for like a rain jacket, like help me understand the best rain jacket for myself on ChatGPT. And, quickly there was the response, which was like, help me understand the primary use case. Do you need this jacket for hiking? Like, does it need to be warm? Are you in a wet region? Do you want something lightweight? How much do you want to spend? And I answered the question and I said, I live in Seattle and I want to go hiking in the mountains and I'm willing to spend whatever, 200 bucks. And I think it was amazing to see how ChatGPT like came back with these recommendations, like three options. This is what we think you should buy, and links to sites where I could purchase those. Amazon, I think it was Amazon REI and the brand site. And that whole experience, now I will say, all of the recommendations were men's jackets. So there's still a gap in the ability, the understanding, like still work to be done. They were all men's jackets, which I was like a little, but I think the main point is like that experience is brand new. It's the same experience I've had with the wire cutter or, a consumer reports or whatever, like, but it's the same idea. And I think we as consumers are going to have more of these opportunities to leverage these interstitial moments to purchase, and that fundamentally changes like the dynamics of the channels we're used to and how transactions happen today, which is very connected to the work that we're doing at Klaviyo and and others. So
Yeah. And for brands, that have and done quite a lot of work on like SEO and how do you show up
yeah,
in Google search
yeah.
results, now
You
it's
can
all
put
up.
in the browser.
Yeah, how do you show up in the AI results? I saw someone from Perplexity and they're the head of advertising and shopping. And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
interesting to mix those two together and really be thinking about like
yeah,
what is that experience for consumers and interacting with it. So that side of it's exciting and give us tech platforms things to think
yeah.
about and new problems to solve and which will be good.
Yeah, I do think it's gonna be very interesting. Like right now, there's a little bit of this perception that like AI is quite agnostic. I say perception because there's some bias, of course. But I do think it will be interesting to see how much influence brands will have over what is presented to consumers, like via this mechanism.
I have actually follow-up question on
Yeah.
this one because it's a very interesting observation. I've heard a voice that advertising actually screwed the internet. Aren't you afraid that the advertising will do the same with the AI solutions?
I want to be a little careful how I answer. I mean, my first response is like, yes. Like, I want there to be pure information that we get that is unbiased by the highest bidder and that it feels like it's just text and that, you could just say, like, oh, great, this is the information. And it's 100% accurate. Like, I don't think that that's realistic. I do think it's really important that people recognize when there's a commercial arrangement under the information. So I don't necessarily feel like it needs to be no ads or ad free or like there isn't a place for that. But I think we could learn from what we've done. I mean, this is a very small thing, but my son's school asked me to help him with a writing project, and there was like some like a website that the teacher sent with some information on the writing assignment. And like in the writing assignment was like all of these ads from like this brand that I had been looking at. And I'm like, oh, like I can't even print this off without getting like all the ads in the writing assignment that I need for myself. So, and we've always had this with recipes and other
Yeah,
things.
we've been there.
So I think it's really about balancing like what can we learn from the way that the internet has gone and how do we do it better, but also there will be surface area that is that.
After 15 years in advertising, I have a perspective. Uh, well, I think Google search was unbiased at one point, and then it became biased. But if you want really good content, someone has to produce that, and someone has to get paid to produce that. And so there's two methods to paying for that. It's ads or the consumer paying for it.
Yeah.
My mom always complains about ads on the internet, and I'm like, well, don't you like that free content? And so, the open web in particular, and you could argue social platforms too, like littered with ads and made for advertising websites. And that's something that needs to be cleaned up and worked on and figured out. I think you're going to have like a bifurcation. This is like totally off the top of my head, but a bifurcation of AI. You're going to have AI that's like, as a consumer, you pay for it and it does give you that. And then hopefully there'll be freer, more accessible AI that will have something else supporting
Yeah.
it because it's expensive to produce AI calls right now. And that will get better, but
Yeah.
that's what we want versus what's actually feasible. Ads are never dying.
I know. I was like, it's that's a great insight. And I think we see that a little bit with like the media platforms, Hulu, Netflix, etc., like offering options with ads and without ads, Spotify. And like maybe they're doing it in a way that feels a little more, I can choose to pay less and have an ad, or I can choose to pay a little more and have that experience without ads.
I think they've probably done it the best. And even how they, especially like the more premium platforms, and there's tons of free apps you can go and get that don't have that experience, but like integrated ads. They're trying to do them that are targeted or useful or whatever it may be. They get to watch the open internet and
Yeah.
do it a little bit
Right,
better.
exactly,
So
and then maybe this will be even one step better where it's like
yeah, but we can be helpful around that. We chat a little bit about like brands and their go to market and personalization. And we, of course, with what we are, we always want to talk about tech companies go to market. And so I'm just curious, we talk about there's product led growth, sales led, marketing led, partner led growth that no one ever likes to talk about but me. But how are you thinking about your X led strategies? And what do you think tech companies should really be focusing on now with all the changes that are happening?
well, I think it's interesting because coming up through sales and being in SaaS now for 15-ish years, a lot has changed. And I think with the rise of people used to have sales and door-to-door sales, and there were sales-led companies, and then there were a bunch of companies that introduced the product-led or PLG motion, and it was like, "Oh, you don't even need sales. The product sells itself." And I think there's lots of you talked about bifurcation, like there's lots of bifurcation in these channels where people are like, oh, it's a sales led deal, or it's a product led deal, or it's a partner led deal. And I think like the sweet spot is in that most consumers want a hybrid. And I know that totally messes with like sales ops plans and all the things, the forecasting, but I think, like, they want to feel like if you think about, like, how do you wanna buy or how does someone wanna buy, I think they really want a hybrid experience. They want the product to be in a place where they can try it. I have sold in the enterprise and sold in SMB. In SMB, it's a free trial. In enterprise, it's a pilot. And, like, those are it's the idea that they want to be able to try the product and see what it's like before they say, "Yes, I'm gonna buy." A demo may not always be enough. And then I think, is the product right for them? So they're answering that question. They want to feel like they can understand, like, what is it going to take to implement it? If I have a question, where do I go? Will it help me solve, XYZ problem? I think ultimately what we need to do is move to a point where we're really crafting an experience using both the product. What is the product doing? What are you doing in it? And also humans, like what is the partnerships team? How is the partner contributing to your experience? How is the sales rep or the marketing content or the case study you received or the life cycle campaign contributing to your experience? And I think we could do a much better job with using data and using product insights to help anticipate like how and where prospects might need help and intervene, during those moments. What can we do with AI and with data to have smarter sellers, like people who are coming to you with more information about what you need and what problems you're trying to solve? Not in a creepy way, of course, but like, I saw you were trying to do XYZ in the product. I can help you with that, or I can help you understand why that's important or where you might be getting stuck. So I think it's we're really like kind of the opportunity is there, quite complex, quite hard to do this, but I'm pretty bullish on this idea of it's not PLG, it's not product led and sales led, it's a hybrid, and it's about thinking about the experience you're driving for a prospect through those tools, through sales reps, through product, whatever.
Yeah. And AI can't replace the strategy behind that experience necessarily, or not yet, but it can help you go and execute some of those experiences. And so that's where that balance comes in.
Yeah, definitely. And it can also highlight things that are missing in the strategy too, right?
Yeah.
Because it provides you another perspective on things. So before we wrap this up, I want to ensure that you're leaving us with some wisdom regarding the career growth and progression. So let's say there's someone right now as a young person is trying to has a different maybe experience, right, or has a different background and is trying to get into tech company. What would be your recommendation for that person to focus on in terms of gaining the skills and experience?
Like, I will say, I think it's a much harder to do kind of what I did in 2010, 2012 than it is today. Like, I think it's much harder to do it today than it is then. I do think if you're looking to pivot, definitely look for companies who are smaller, who typically can't afford, I'll just say like can't afford to compete with like the salaries of larger tech companies. So like think about like where they're going to be looking for people they can afford coming into some of these roles. I also think consider an entry level role. It's called entry level for a reason, but like in the sales org, BDR, support or CS, like even just to get your foot in the door, like those positions are typically set up to like train someone to do some of these new, to understand tech if you've never worked in tech before. I think one of the most highly valuable and translatable skills is being a good writer. And of course, like there's tons of tools to make you a better writer, but a lot of work that we do in tech companies is written. So it's writing a doc, it's sending an email, it's sending a Slack message, it's following up with a prospect, it's communicating an idea. There's a lot of information that's captured in writing. It's answering a support ticket. It's like articulating something in a customer education document or whatever. So I think more than anything else, like that is a skill that if you're coming in from another career at teachers, like I love like teachers, I think as a career move, having a teacher come into your team and be thinking about how do you translate your skills in the classroom with educating and writing and some of the skills that are very much needed in technology companies is a great example. Think about the skills that are translatable, like writing, focus on those, and then be willing to like take a risk with something that, you might have to move down a level or multiple levels to get your foot in the door to make that pivot.
I like that.
I
Yeah.
love that. It's something that you can transfer. It reminds me a little bit of skills around being a good athlete and being good in sport, right?
Mhm.
Specific sport.
Yeah.
Another question I have for you is you're probably facing that question quite often as a leader, right? Like, hey, I see, at some point I want to enter the kind of leadership
Mhm.
path. So, what are the kind of a piece of advice you giving your team members or other people that are asking you to mentor them, or in general, on progressing towards that goal?
The first thing I think is like, don't wait for someone to make you a leader. Leadership is something that any role can display. Think about opportunities. Being a leader doesn't mean being a people leader. Being a people leader is a way to be a leader, but it's not the only way. So think about like what are the ways in your existing role you can show up and you can demonstrate leadership through the work you're already doing. And then I think the second thing is like, this is really for women. This is my feedback for women, especially. I think it probably applies more broadly, but there is a real inflection point that happens when you're trying to become a director or a VP. And it's much harder than you think. I think a lot of women who are traditionally like very high performing, they tend to be like kind of workhorses. Like, I can do anything, I can get everything done. I've always been a type A student. I've never had an assignment that was late. I do all the things that no one else will do, and I do them better than anyone else. That is awesome for getting to, you might be promoted quickly early in your career, and then you get to this, like, what feels like a ceiling and you don't know how to break through that ceiling to prove that you are indeed director or VP level material. And I think really that is about recognizing that you need to shift in how you are positioning yourself and packaging up your work. So instead of showing like, this is all the stuff that I've done, this is the what, you need to start thinking about like, why. How are you tying your work back to business outcomes, because the business outcomes are going to be the things that executives are looking for, someone who can align their work with business outcomes at that director and VP level. And it is a weird mindset shift, but I think it's a really important thing to consider when you're looking to keep growing in your career as a leader.
I like that a lot. You have to start to think about like marketing yourself to a degree, and but that shift of like the what to the why. Women are incredible, no offense, Demetrius, and will do most
And
things that you throw at them, but it's very different. So, yeah.
it's more likely that you might get like sucked into like, I'm doing so much, I'm working so hard, I'm doing all of these tasks, why won't I get promoted? And I think it's about like the tasks and like the perfect execution might be the thing that's actually like kind of minimizing like how you show up as an executive.
Yeah, it's the taking notes in a meeting. Like women
Oh,
are always
100%.
taking the
Yeah,
notes, and sometimes I'm like,
don't volunteer for that.
I'm not taking the notes. I'm sitting here and contributing. So,
Yeah.
well, Anne, you shared so much wisdom with us, and I loved hearing about your journey and your perspective on market trends. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was
Thank
really
you.
fun. Thank you for
Great.
inviting me and great to be a participant. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.